Hello and welcome to the Feng Shui for Us group. Today we're talking about tablecloths and placemats, why you should use them, and what they mean. The When I was, I learned this rule of manners when I was already an adult, that you should have a tablecloth or placemats, but never both. And I never learned this when I was growing up because my parents were like enemies of tablecloths and enemies of placemats. Like in my whole life, I don't ever remember them buying a tablecloth or placemats. And so they had a table that was a wooden round table and was covered with formica and it was like dark. And they never had a tablecloth or a placemat. They would just serve the plates directly on the table. And I guess because it was formica and not wood, there was not the risk that that's gonna damage, that any water on the dishes or silverware is gonna damage the wood. That was never a concern. And of course, I had gone to my grandmother, and and she was a lady of refinement, so she's always doing things really nicely, and she was big on manners. And so I had noticed, look on hindsight, I had noticed that she used placemats. Most days, she used placemats, and she only had the really beautiful tablecloths that she used. She had them out only when she had guests. But I had never noticed that it was either or, and I only realized this when I was an adult and one of my aunts came to visit when I was already married, and I had my tablecloth on, and I started getting the placemats out, and she said, "What are you doing? Tablecloths or placemats, but never both." And then I had never realized this because of that, because my parents didn't use a tablecloth. And so when I wanted to get your input about this, because I have noticed in the United States people just don't care about manners very much. My husband and I, we are trying to teach our children manners because we always have. Because where I come from, you can't get very far in life unless you have good manners. Like you cannot get a good job, you cannot have a prosperous business because a lot of the interaction happens. You invite people over for dinner, they invite you over for dinner. You don't have good manners, you're not gonna get those promotions, you're not gonna get the job, you're not gonna get the contract. And so, because of that, here we really emphasize that you need to do that you need to have good manners. But in the United States, it seems to me that's not the emphasis, right? And so, give me your opinion. I would like to hear your opinion of how important do you think manners are, and is it your responsibility to teach manners to your children? And also, what are the manners that you think are most important for them to learn? So the reason you have a tablecloth or a placemat is to protect your table, right? And hopefully in your dining room, you have a very nice wooden table. And it's nice enough that you want to protect it. And so you're going to use a tablecloth or a placemat in order to protect the table from all the things that could be spilling from your food. And the tablecloth is going to give you more a feeling of things being formal, right? And so you can do like my grandmother did, and you can just have some really nice tablecloths. And I recommend that your tablecloths be thick, not too thin, um, not too. What would be the word? I guess they have to have some substance, so that if there's ever a spill, most of it would be absorbed by the material of the tablecloth. And so you can have some very beautiful tablecloths, and you can change them seasonally, and just use them for special occasions, or maybe even just once a week. If once a week your family comes over to, like your grown kids, they come to visit after church and they have lunch at your place, then get the really nice tablecloths out and all that. And then for holidays like Easter and 4th of July and Thanksgiving or Christmas, right? And then you can have some simpler, more rugged tablecloths to use on a daily basis, or you can have placemats. In our family, we use both, but not at the same time, right? So we have about 7, 8 different tablecloths that we change around to add variety to our dining room. And we usually only use the placemats when we have run out of tablecloths, because with two teenagers, one boy is 15 years old and one boy is 18 years old. With two teenagers, sometimes things get messy, so we change those tablecloths often. And so when we're run out of those, we use the placemats. And then, we also, in our household, we have decided to use cloth napkins, because we don't like the waste of using paper napkins, and also because it gives us an opportunity of teaching more manners to the children. And so when I first moved to the United States, there was this culture shock. There's a lot of things that were a shock to me. And it seems that culture shock never ends. Whenever you go through a new stage of life, or your children go through a new stage of life, you see these differences. But I also have had culture shock, because I moved from Ecuador to Mississippi first, from Mississippi to Iowa, and then from Iowa to Tennessee. And I also had some culture shock when moving from state to state. But one of the things that is so surprising to me is that most Americans, they speak with food in their mouth. And that to me is like, that's one of the first things you learn in Latin America, is never speak with food in your mouth, not even a little bit. And so, and I notice, that most Americans, and it doesn't matter, it could be blue collar workers, white collar people, it could be doctors, it could be politicians, it could be anybody. And most people here speak with food in their mouths. And that to me is just like a no-no. So my husband and I, we try to impress upon our kids they shouldn't do that. But it's really hard to go against the grain of everybody else, right? And when I was in Mississippi, when I had first arrived, like a lot of people, I saw mothers telling their children, cover your mouth when you want to speak with food. Put your fingers here when you want to speak with food in your mouth. And to me, that was like, why are you giving people techniques on how to do something they shouldn't be doing? And so you may disagree with me, but I would like to know what manners are important to you. And so one of the reasons we want our kids to know manners is because we don't ever want our kids to be humiliated from having bad manners. I don't think that is ever a good thing for anybody to have that happen. And so we hammer it on them, that and I think I have said this tens of thousands of times. Don't speak with food in your mouth. Finish chewing and swallowing the mouthful that's in your mouth before you put more food in there. And to me, that's just basic things, right? And so I would like to hear from you, what manners do you think are important? And how important do you think table manners are? Now, one interesting thing for us, me coming from South America, we use Spanish manners. So the way we hold our silverware, the way we eat, it all comes from our inheritance from, we call it the parent, like the mother country, or the mother nation is Spain. And so we get our manners from Spain. But a lot of people here in the United States, when they do stress manners, their manners come from the United Kingdom or from France. And we've not noticed certain differences, right? For example, here in the United States, most people, like if you go eat, they just give you a fork and that's it. And for us, you always get a spoon, you get a fork, you get a knife, and that's the most basic. And then you might get another fork for the salad, you might get a fork for the dessert, and you may get a teaspoon for your coffee or tea. And so in our Spanish tradition, you hold the fork in your left hand and the knife on your right hand, and then you cut the food, and then you eat with the left hand. But in the British tradition, they hold the knife with the right hand and the fork with the left hand, and they cut their food. But then they set down the knife and they move the fork to the right hand, and then they eat with the right hand. I would like to hear from you, how were you taught to eat? And when you were growing up, was there just a fork, or was there also a knife, or there's a spoon? Now for us, there's also a spoon, because all meals in Latin America, they start with soup. And our kids are crazy about vegetable soup, which is something I'm very, very proud that I raised them in a way that they love vegetables so much. whenever there's going to be a special occasion, and I ask them, okay, what do you want the menu to be for Christmas or for your birthday or for this other special occasion? And the first thing they write down is vegetable soup, and they'll tell me what kind of vegetable soup. And so we always have soup, so there's always that spoon. And one thing that what we teach the kids, because manners can change, right? So some things that I've been doing a certain way all my life, somebody here has told me, no, that's not the way you do it, because they are using French manners or British manners. And so one thing that we tell the kids, one thing that we try to teach them is don't ever start eating before your host starts eating. Don't just sit at the table and start munching. But you always wait for your host to sit down. And one reason for that is because it's just polite, to wait for your host to tell you, go ahead and eat. But also in case there's something you don't know about the manners. And so you can see what piece of silverware your host reaches for when they start eating. And of course, I'm sure you've heard, like, if you don't know, it's a safe bet to take the silverware from the outside in, right? Another thing that we try and teach the boys is our family doesn't drink, I have some water here. Our family doesn't drink during meals, like nothing. There's no water, there's no juice, no sodas, no nothing. You get your soup, you get your entree, and then when the meal is over, you may get a drink. You may get coffee, you may get tea, hot cocoa, you may get a juice. But you do not drink during meals, because it's really, really bad, to just put food in your mouth and then follow with a drink, and then you don't chew properly. And so that's one thing that our family doesn't do. Only when we have guests, we have to remember to at least give them water, because a lot of people are used to drinking while they eat. But and one thing that we teach them is, if you are at a place where there are drinks on the table, like if we go to a restaurant and there's water there, to use their napkin before they reach for the drink. Because if you don't use your napkin before you reach for the drink, you could leave food on the edge of your glass, and that looks nasty. And so there's all these things, right? And of course, I was raised one way, my husband was raised a different way. And there's little variations in the manners, because his family in Ecuador was from a different province. And so we have to talk about it, and we have to agree on what we're going to do, what we're going to teach them. Another thing our children would never, ever do, and they would get in serious trouble if they tried it, is that you finish your meal and you take off. That's no over here. And I've seen in so many homes that the children finish eating their food and they don't say anything. And some pick up their plate, take it to the kitchen. Some don't pick up the plate, and they just take off. So that's something that just doesn't happen here. Another thing is, we set the table. We set the table for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. And we don't know how to not do that, because it's such an ingrained cultural tradition for us that you set the table, that we feel that something's gone horribly awry if we don't do it. But I have seen, like, a lot of families in the United States, like, you go to the kitchen counter, you get a plate, you serve yourself, you grab a fork, and then you take your food and you sit down, right? And so those are different customs. And I think part of being happy in life is being able to adapt to the different customs and to be happy that way. But I also think that you should learn the manners for a formal occasion, for a formal dinner, right? And so that nobody ever has the occasion to put you or your children down because you didn't know which glass to use for your water, which one to use for your wine, because you didn't know which fork to use. And so I wish that nobody in the world was elitist, but human societies are hierarchical, and it matters. When it may not matter, like for most people in the United States, that might really not matter. But up to a certain level, if you want to get promoted if you want to get promoted beyond a certain level, if you want to do business with people who could really benefit your business, you really have to have good manners. That's just the given. And I would like to hear from you. I would like to hear your opinion. How important do you think manners are? Were you taught manners? Did you teach your children, if you have children? And how important do you think that is to get ahead in life? Or do you feel like that's too stifled? And do you feel that we should just do away with manners? The dining room is the place where you create family unity. The dining room is the place where there's going to be family strength. And if you organize, if you decorate your dining room so it's beautiful, if you provide conversation exciting enough that it's more interesting to your children than their phones, and if you provide excellent healthy food that is more delicious than eating out to eat in any restaurant, you can be guaranteed you're going to have amazing, amazing meals, amazing communication with your kids, and amazing family strength. And so the other thing that I want to share with you, and if you are interested in learning how to prepare healthy foods that are more delicious than junk food, write a note in the comments and I'll share a resource with you that my family prepared to share with other families. And so I really would like to hear your opinion, whether you agree with me or you disagree. And especially I would like to hear, like, of all the scope of manners that you could teach your children, what is what you consider to be number one? And also tell me, when it comes to table manners, what is what you consider to be number one? So for me, it's in manners in general, the most important thing I think is to teach the children how to say hello when they get introduced to a person. And the second, when it comes to table manners, right, to me, the most important thing is to not speak when there's food in your mouth. So I'd like to hear your opinion. And also I want to remind you that in the Feng Shui Dream Home Creation Lab, right now we're working on dining rooms. This week, we're going to be talking about how to choose the patterns, the colors, and the designs of tablecloths, placemats, dishware, china, silverware, and glassware, so that you can have a versatile, ever adapting to the seasons, beautiful dining area that is going to promote family strength and health. If you are interested in that, also let me know and I'll share the link with you. You can join the Feng Shui Dream Home Creation Lab anytime, and you get to study whatever topic we're working on at the moment. But you also get access to the recorded videos of all the other topics we had explored in the past. So I'll be sharing that link with you all. Thank you so much for showing up to watch this. And also thank you for all of you who watched the whole video if you are watching the replay. And I look forward to hear from you and to share more with you about dining rooms next week. Bye-bye.